Hello everybody, I'm Kate Cass. Welcome to an edition of Let's Talk About. Today, let's talk once again about Milo Murphy's Law.
It's my world and we're all living in it.
About 2 years ago, I did my first video on Milo Murphy's Law, reviewing Season 1. The big reasons I made that video were to share my enthusiasm for a show that I felt was getting overlooked, and to vocalize that enthusiasm in a way that might, in some small way, affect whether or not it would continue after not having a new episode for almost a year by that point, and yet no confirmation that the show had been cancelled. But looking back on how Disney handled Season 2 when it came to promotion and scheduling, the writing was on the wall, even if we couldn't read it at the time. By the time they had released that long-anticipated crossover with Phineas and Ferb in the US, the show was clearly destined for the dustbin, which makes looking back on Season 2 for this video a bit bittersweet. It's tough to remind myself that this will likely be the last set of adventures Milo and the gang would ever have, but it was also the time I was the most invested in the show. Back when Season 2 was airing, I used to have to run these really early morning errands every Saturday. Coming back home with an everything bagel to watch the newest episode of Milo Murphy's Law became a tradition for a couple months there. Like when us millennials were kids watching Saturday morning cartoons. But that's enough reminiscing for now. Let's take a look at Season 2 of Milo Murphy's Law and see what changed, what stayed the same, and how this season where we're all living in Milo's world went a little out of this world. In a pretty smart callback to the very first episode, Season 2 kicks off in a very familiar way, with Milo and Zach on another insane chase trying to outrun Murphy's Law and get to school on time. Except this time it's winter.
Just gotta save the world and get to school on time.
It's not the best episode of the season, sure, but I thought it was a cool way to reacquaint everyone to the status quo of the show while acknowledging what's different. The seasons have changed, so time is passing, and at a decent pace, Cavendish and Dakota have a more featured role, and hey, look at that, we have a new character.
Alright, that's the last time I go to a rave on a school night.
We'll come back to him. For the first half of the season, on Milo's end of things, it's mostly back to business as usual, trying to get through special occasions or everyday activities while navigating the obstacles that come with Murphy's Law. From attempting to complete simple tasks like taking a school picture or finishing a board game, to more ridiculous escapades like an incident with a wind tunnel forcing the group to spend the entire episode in the air trying to reach the ground again, or making it through an already physically challenging game show with the hurdles of Murphy's Law added in. Because of how much has changed and been introduced around Milo and friends, there aren't many episodes that revolve solely around this premise in Season 2. But that's fine with me, since my biggest issue with Season 1 was that it was sometimes tough for that type of story to fill an 11-minute episode. Though I do understand if some people miss the simplicity of those early episodes. However, fewer chances to dedicate an episode to these kinds of stories also means that when they do, they go all out. I know the very first episode of the show almost saw Milo and Zach abducted by aliens, but the comedic chain reactions that are set off by Murphy's Law in some of these episodes seem even more elaborate and bombastic than almost anything in Season 1, which does lead to some of the more memorable and rewatchable episodes in the season. It still keeps the basic premise and approach to the show intact, just with a wider range of challenges, as well as new challenges for the characters. I wouldn't say there are any major changes with the three main characters, but there's definitely an attempt to put them in front of different obstacles and show growth. Zach dealing with being afraid of dangerous and spontaneous situations is put through a lot of tests this season to both comedic and heartfelt effect. It shows how much he's grown by just being friends with Milo and Melissa. Though shockingly, there's barely any mention of the Lumberjacks this season. I don't even think the rest of the group show up, which is a shame because I think you could tell some more fun stories with that part of Zach's past. Like going more into why the group split up, or maybe even have a new kid at school who thinks he and Zach can become great friends because he's a big fan of his music. There's potential there, and if the show does ever manage to continue, I hope they take another look at it. Melissa is still her cool, confident self, but she gets put through some challenges of her own, usually involving proving herself or being influenced by an outside source to test her determination. The most memorable one for me was when, through some mixed-up shenanigans, Melissa winds up being the mentee of ace time traveler Savannah. It's a really cool escapade that shows how some can underestimate how capable Melissa is because she's a teenage teenage girl, but not in a way that's in your face about it, which is nice. Milo is Milo. He didn't really need to change all that much. He's resourceful, optimistic, and incredibly friendly. That's really all you need to get by in life. But boy, are those traits put through some huge tests in this season. Milo may be willing to call someone out when he thinks they're being inconsiderate, but this kid's patience and understanding is something to aspire to. What changes for Milo in season 2 is how much the attitude around him has changed. During season 1, Milo's social circle pretty much consisted of his family, Melissa, the slowly accepting Zach, and Dog. As season 2 progresses, however, we see how much more willing people are to spend time with Milo, invite him to events, and even ask for his help. Compare this to the first episode when most of his peers didn't even want to stand near him. Shots like these were really sweet to me, as it illustrates that the growth in this series has been through others accepting Milo for the kind person he is, and not just the curse that follows him. Because of this, a lot of the supporting cast have their roles expanded on in the second season. The writers clearly realized in the gap between seasons which characters were the most fun to work with, and let them be more involved in the episodic antics. We get to spend more time around Milo's parents. We get to hang out with Neil from the comic shop as he becomes a regular character. We don't learn much about him, and his relationship with Sarah doesn't really go any further than casual dating, but it's nice that the show decided to keep him around. The writers definitely discovered how much they loved writing for Scott the Undergrounder, so he's in it a lot more this time, and even gets a couple of dedicated episodes. Not my favorites, to be honest. Scott's a fun character, but not one that can carry an episode, in my opinion. But I think the biggest improvements in the supporting cast are Elliot and Amanda. I didn't talk about Elliot much in my season 1 video, and that's mostly because he kind of annoyed me. It's a really funny idea to give Milo a one-sided rival who's obsessed with safety, but for me, whenever Elliot showed up, he overstayed his welcome. But I think season 2 corrected this a bit by having a mix between frustrated antics and surprising character evolution. There are a few episodes in season 2 dedicated to Elliot reassessing how he sees Milo, from mildly appreciating the spontaneity of Milo's day-to-day life, to realizing how careful and responsible Milo can really be, to even getting to the root of his own obsession with safety in a truly hilarious set of circumstances. He never really changes his attitude towards Milo, but I do think the experience has left an impact, albeit a minor one. Oh, also, Elliot's obsession with safety was inadvertently caused by a Murphy's Law incident thanks to Milo's dad. Whoops. Meanwhile, Amanda's change towards Milo is very clear and very progressive, right from her first featured episode, Cakesplosion, where she's picked to participate in her favorite baking/athletically challenging competition show, a sentence that won't sound all that strange as the season goes on. The catch is that Milo has to be her partner. Naturally, Murphy's Law gets in the way of an already challenging series of events. Amanda tries to be her controlling self and keep Milo distant from the competition, but eventually she sees more of what she saw in bits and pieces back in season 1, how prepared Milo is for any eventuality, and that she'd rather have him around than push him away. So by the end, when it seems like they lost, Amanda isn't disappointed or angry, she's happy about the experience she's had, seeing what it's really like to live like Milo, and having fun with it. And it turns out they won anyway, yay! From that point on, Amanda is promoted to honorary member of the main group and Milo's sort of girlfriend, using her propensity for planning ahead to help Milo rather than ostracize him. Once she takes that step forward, she never takes one back. It's honestly one of the best displays of character development in the entire series. I will say that in between all those nice moments, it's still a shame that some characters don't get to evolve or even be featured all that much. Seriously, how is Bradley part plant now and all he gets is a bunch of one-off gags? They get so close to actually making the supposed rival relevant at one point, but then Mid-Afternoon Snack Club goes from a potential story to develop a group of characters to just give Zach one moment at the end. There might be a reason for that though, because season 2 of Milo Murphy's Law had to make room for a brand new character. Well, new for them anyway.
Doofenshmirtz is in the house. What up?
Okay, yeah, let's talk about this. Remember back in my review of the Phineas and Ferb effect, where I said that crossover would have long-lasting effects on Milo Murphy's Law? The biggest one was when Dr. Doofenshmirtz's building is destroyed by Murphy's Law, he asks if he can crash with Milo. Turns out, that wasn't just a fun gag to end that special on. Doofenshmirtz moves in with the Murphy family indefinitely and becomes a regular cast member on Milo Murphy's Law. This is the most divisive choice made this season. There's even a lengthy reply chain train in the comments of my season 1 video on people sharing their thoughts on this inclusion. Let's address the criticisms and concerns first. As the season went on, many fans were getting frustrated that it seemed like Doof's shenanigans were interrupting the shenanigans of Milo and friends. To some, it felt like Disney, or even the crew themselves, were losing faith in this new show they created and brought in one of the most popular characters from their very popular previous show to fix something that wasn't broken. Let me just say that I don't fault anyone for feeling that way. Doofenshmirtz is one of those characters who's kind of a scene stealer. Heck, watch the last season of Phineas and Ferb again. It definitely becomes much more about Perry and Doof than it was about the stepbrothers by that point. Which means he can be a very distracting character. It'd be like if Norm from Cheers suddenly showed up on Frasier, and instead of leaving at the end of the episode like the other guest appearances, he was like, oh, good news, I'm renting the apartment down the hall, so we're gonna be neighbors now. Meaning he could barge in whenever he wanted, just like on Cheers, and that was just the status quo from that point on. Heck, I would say Doofenshmirtz's storyline takes up about a quarter of the second season, with various characters from Phineas and Ferb dropping by as well, most frequently Perry. So when this isn't what Milo Murphy fans are here for, I can see this as being an annoying inclusion. But I'm gonna argue in favor of Doofenshmirtz on this show. The biggest thing that is working against this idea is one of the things I found the most interesting about it, bringing in a character from a previous show as a regular cast member. It was something I'd never really seen before and made the Phineas and Ferb crossover essential viewing instead of fun but disposable like so many crossovers are. Given where his arc ended in Phineas and Ferb, there were actually new places to go with him as a character rather than repeating the same formulas from before. If you remember, in the series finale for Phineas and Ferb, Doofenshmirtz decided to take his life in a new direction and become a good guy. That path is given a bit more of an end goal in the crossover with Milo Murphy's Law when he finds out he'll one day invent time travel and be revered as a genius and a hero, changing his name to Professor Time for branding purposes. God, that's still such a funny explanation. However, in between the point A of no longer trying to rule the tri-state area and the point B of becoming a national treasure for a monumental scientific breakthrough is a long, uncertain path, one Doof is trying to navigate during his time on Milo Murphy's Law. This isn't like Team Rocket, where there's tons of proof that they're good at pretty much anything that doesn't involve stealing Pokemon. Turns out Hines is a screw-up by nature, attempting to use his innators for good, most of which are portable now, so that's convenient, but only causing destruction. It's clear that road to becoming Professor Time is one that's not going to be easier just because he knows his destination now. It even strains his relationship with Perry after his assignment shifts from stopping Doofenshmirtz's schemes to just making sure he doesn't destroy the city trying to help. It's kind of like if that famous subplot in It's About Time was a 10-episode arc, and it's great. This is an approach to the character that I think really works, especially on this show, and here's why. Doof's style of chaos, that's been retooled to try and help others, works very well in tandem with the chaos of Murphy's Law that this group is used to, even if Doof's destruction comes from a very different source.
It's caused by my,
Stupidity?
Incompetence?
I was gonna say poor planning, but thank you for that.
There are times where Doofenshmirtz's antics are separate from the rest of the group, but for the most part, he works alongside the main cast, getting caught up in their lives, and even helping out every once in a while. Doof found the solution to a problem in an episode on more than one occasion. Doofenshmirtz's style of chaos just works so well alongside this group of characters, probably because they're well equipped to deal with these kinds of disasters, and maybe even help Hines put his eccentricities to good use. It may be treated as a joke, but given Doof's history, is it any wonder why he started forming an unusual familial attachment to this family who mildly tolerates him? They do their best to welcome him into the group, even when they find it kind of weird that he's still sticking around. You know, like half the audience. This wasn't a tactic to save the show. This was not something Disney forced on the creative team so they could keep cashing in on one of their most popular programs. This was a direction the creative team wanted to take.
First season on Milo, we were thinking, okay, we're gonna do this big build to this big reveal that it's all connected, and then once we reveal that it's all connected, we'll be able to bring characters like Doofenshmirtz and Monogram and whatever into Milo whenever we want. And the studio will not be the wiser. We'll have fooled them.
I do get both points of view on the situation, but personally, I don't think Doofenshmirtz's inclusion hurts the show. And if anything, it helps to enhance Hines' slow but steady character progression. It's tough to tell if he really learns anything during all these shenanigans. I'm gonna go with no, but he's trying, and it feels really good to see. Besides, if we're gonna talk about forced inclusions in season 2, how about all these weird, quirky side stories? Like I said, season 2 goes a bit more off the wall than season 1, and for the most part, it's very organized chaos. A domino effect that may lead to a really absurd destination, but you can see the path clearly. Heck, there's an entire episode about how wide-reaching the cause and effect in the show can get. Then you have these weird extra subplots going on during the season. The cybernetic grizzly bear developed by the government gone rogue, Zippy the world's fastest koala. If they were just one-off random non-sequiturs, they'd be harmless enough and might even be really funny in how ridiculous they are. Again, this is the same creative team who developed Klimpaloon, the magical old-timey bathing suit who lives in the Himalayas. But as time goes on, they start to become subplots of their own, with clear motives and tragic backstories. As the season went on and they showed up more, they could really hijack an episode, and it was really distracting. You remember in the tail end of Phineas and Ferb, where a couple episodes featured those weird little alien bugs that are not mentioned in the season despite the major storyline revolving around aliens? This is kind of like them. It's this really confusing thing that no one really understands why it's there, but it's taking up screen time anyway. It feels almost like a satire of ongoing mysteries, but with no end goal in sight for the joke. This is why I understand where people are coming from about Doofenshmirtz's inclusion, even if I don't agree, because that's how I felt about these weird extra characters and storylines introduced. They're too fleshed out to be running gags, but not developed enough to be compelling or fun stories. And I think the season would have been a lot better off if they just cut them. But there is one season 2 addition that I will always be on board with, and that's Recurring Raccoon.
You've seen it before, you're gonna see him soon. He's Recurring Raccoon.
I need to protect him. Alright, that's enough about the new stuff for now. Let's talk about a subplot we know works. The misadventures of everyone's favorite incompetent time travelers, Cavendish and Dakota. Actually, it might be more appropriate to call them former time travelers. Yeah, after the invasion with the Pistachions, and after Dakota spilled the beans about his private island paradox, the two are banned from time traveling and are now stuck in Milo's time indefinitely. Which was certainly an unexpected development. Like, Cavendish and Dakota as a plot device were already going against every convention set up by Dan and Swampy's previous work. Now we're adding in long-term changes. Time travel was kind of their whole thing. This would be like deciding that the main villain in your show should become good and move into a shack in your main character's backyard. Oh. Yeah, I hear it. So if these two can't time travel and don't have to be obsessed with pistachios, what are they gonna do all day? Oh, I'm so glad you asked. Not long after they were fired, they were rehired by the ancestor of their future former boss, Mr. Block, who's also the head of a covert organization dealing with sci-fi nonsense. Perhaps the last dose of confusing time travel explanations from Milo and Murphy's Law. Let's just take a second to appreciate it.
Wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey.
Okay, they're on a new path, so maybe it's one where they'll be more successful? No, if anything, it's far more demeaning. Cavendish and Dakota now work for PIG, Purgers of Intergalactic Garbage. Yep, these two are seen as so incompetent that they went from trying and failing to protect the pistachio to cleaning up alien trash. Cavendish takes this well.
Alien trash. This is rubbish, which means trash.
It is weird not seeing Cavendish and Dakota as time travelers anymore, but transferring from one side of Doctor Who's premise to the other does still offer a fair amount of fun shenanigans. Once again, I appreciate how the team were willing to shake things up and try something new so the series didn't get stale. Cavendish and Dakota still remain the B-plot, crossing over casually with Milo and the gang every once in a while, but their new job offers the team the chance to play around with new crazy scenarios for these two. For the first half of season 2, most of Cavendish and Dakota's antics revolve around them finding some kind of alien device during their trash pickups and trying to dispose of it. You can tell the writers had a lot of fun conjuring up the side effects these two could deal with while stumbling across alien devices carelessly left behind. For the most part, it's their usual tomfoolery, but things take an interesting turn in the subplot during the episode Abducting Murphy's Law, where Cavendish becomes obsessed with a UFO he witnesses abducting someone that no one else saw. This actually has a major impact on this season's season's ongoing story, but we'll come back to that later. What's important now is how this shakes up the relationship between our two former time travelers. Cavendish was already someone who felt like he was getting the short end of the stick and was meant for greater things. Now he's gotten a taste of what it's like to save the world, so he wants to do that again and get some dang recognition for it. So when he witnesses this alien abduction, he sees it as opportunity knocking on his door and is hell-bent on tracking the spaceship down despite being told to let it go. Meanwhile, Dakota is actually the more conservative of the pair this time. What's seen at first as Dakota just being lazy and apathetic turns out to be him trying to stay in line. Without time travel, he realized there's no way to go back and fix their mistakes and that they're stuck in this time period far away from home. So what appears to be behavior that's just Dakota being Dakota are strategies to keep their menial jobs and, more importantly, keep them safe. Suddenly, their roles are reversed. Dakota is the guy just trying to do his job and not get in trouble, while Cavendish is the renegade who's willing to break the rules to do what he wants, whose actions are coded with just the right amount of well-meaning intentions that he doesn't come off as a selfish asshole. This causes a rift in their partnership that Cavendish turns into a massive chasm by deciding to go rogue and leave Dakota behind. It's a surprisingly shocking moment, at least if you were overly invested in the show by this point like I was. Just when I thought they were done shifting the status quo, they mess with it yet again, and it's so good. You wouldn't think Cavendish would work as a character without Dakota to bounce off of, but seeing him get into all sorts of comedic situations, trying and failing to prove the existence of this UFO, was one of the highlights of the second half of the season. I had a blast with these Candace Flynn-like hits and misses that still stay very true to Cavendish's character. The episode Look at This Ship is one of my favorites this season for that very reason.
If it wasn't here, could I do this? Ta-da!
Meanwhile, without Cavendish, Dakota needs someone else to spend his time with since he's not on an epic quest for validation. And who better than Dr. Doofenshmirtz? By this point in the show, Doof has cut ties with Perry over a misunderstanding, so they both need a new buddy. It is kind of amazing to watch Vinny Dakota be the reasonable one in a team-up, as there are times where Doof is too lazy even for him, but as well written as it can be, this little dynamic is mostly fun for the fact that Dan Povenmire spends the latter half of the season pretty much talking to himself.
That is all I have done all day is hear you say things in that annoying nasal tone. Oh, you're one to talk.
Once again, Cavendish and Dakota add that extra bit of spice to the show. A lot of the conflict they brought to the show was wrapped up by the time the Phineas and Ferb crossover happened, so I appreciate that they took the time to figure out new things to do with the pair that would still be entertaining and even kinda dramatic. In between all these shenanigans and moments of character conflict, development, and really out there story beats sometimes, there is once again a continuing storyline going on in the shadows of these episodic events. But before we dive into that, like when I covered season 1, I want to talk about some other areas of the writing and production of this season that I couldn't find a place for anywhere else. I don't have much to say about the animation or voice acting this time. There are some great deliveries and striking, almost cinematic moments though, especially once we get to the season finale. It's consistent with the style and performances presented in season 1, and that's good enough for me. Something that has not remained consistent, at least in my opinion, is the songs. There are way more songs this time, and most of them are longer, but unfortunately, they don't leave as much of an impression on me as season 1 songs did, which I think comes down to the fact that in season 2, most of the songs are background music, catchy tunes played over chase scenes or montages. Yeah, the lyrics are pretty fun and clever if you pay attention, but they all kind of sound the same, which makes sense on some level as most of them serve the same purpose and thus need to stick to a similar rhythm, but that doesn't make it any less frustrating. Only 2 songs in season 2 are character songs. How do you bring back Doofenshmirtz, who IMHO has some of the best songs in Phineas and Ferb, and only give him 1? How does Milo Weird Al Yankovic Murphy not sing a single line this entire season? I understand this group has already written over 200 100 high-quality songs for their previous show. I wasn't expecting that again with Milo Murphy's Law. But if you're gonna write all these songs anyway, why not mix it up? Could you imagine, say, a big honkin' hole in my heart style song when Cavendish and Dakota split up? Or Milo and friends teaching Doof how to think things through more in song? You've got a talented group and some great circumstances for funny or even emotional music. Use it! Well, at least they take advantage of the fact that they don't have to be so secretive with this show's connection to Phineas and Ferb anymore.
Who are these people?
Oh, sorry, Norm, this is a whole new series of events that have transpired.
This is where season 2 stands out from season 1, not only by inheriting a new regular cast member, but getting to include more obvious locations, references, and characters from Phineas and Ferb. This is one of those things that either annoyed or delighted viewers. Personally, I'm in the latter category. I think they managed to walk the line of organically occurring fan service without shoving references and recurring characters in your face to remind you that this is the same universe as the show you grew up with. As usual, the always reliable Second Dimension exhaustingly cataloged every single callback and reference to Phineas and Ferb in the season, and I mean all of them. So if you want to see just what they included and where, that's the content you should check out. He also has a ton of reviews and streams from when the season was airing, so if you find yourself rewatching the season after this, definitely check out his videos as a companion piece. Meanwhile, look at that sub count. Like he needs my promotion. I send you to someone far more knowledgeable than me, because to go through all the callbacks would be impossible in a video like this. I will say that it was a real treat to get to see returning characters like Perry, and even Norm and Vanessa because of Doof's regular involvement on the show, and Jeremy Johnson, of all people, makes a return. But I guess he couldn't find time to make an on-screen appearance, so we only get his voice. Well, it was still pretty funny. But hands down, my favorite callback to Phineas and Ferb is the entirety of the episode Agent ENT DOG. An episode that's dedicated to debunking the very popular fan theory that DOG was a secret agent, just like Perry the Platypus, to marvelous comedic effect. I'm sure it annoyed some people who were hoping that that would be the big reveal, but I'm sorry. Creating a story that shows that DOG is unequipped to be an Alka agent while still making him unwittingly able to defeat Doofenshmirtz is funny on so many levels, it evades description. I like that DOG just turned out to be a really loyal dog who would get caught up in all manner of situation to follow Milo around. Honestly, the most unbelievable thing about this episode is that Perry apparently got a day off at one point. Look, maybe I'm biased because I am a big fan of the Phineas and Ferb cast, especially the ones on Doof's side of the story, and I always get a kick out of seeing old characters on spin-offs anyway, but I think pretty much every appearance from a Phineas and Ferb cast member is handled well and are very fun and exciting when they happen. Almost as fun and exciting as our storyline for this season. Boom! Flawless segue. We may have put time travel in the past, but that doesn't mean the season won't have its own ongoing story to tell. A story that starts lightly, has a catalyst when things get real, progressing smoothly until the epic finale. I gotta give props to the Milo Murphy's Law team here, because they managed to pull the same stunt with their continuing storyline twice. At first, the main alien race invading this season, the Octalians, appear to just be another running gag. There is a precedent for having aliens show up for quick gags in both Dan and Swampy shows, so when this one spaceship keeps trying to invade but always gets intercepted by chaos caused by Murphy's Law, it felt at first like a good running gag and nothing more. Especially with Cavendish and Dakota now being employed to watch out for aliens, and we all know they'd probably be far too incompetent to notice the same ship visiting Earth over and over again. But like last season, that all changes as we learn more about the aliens. When they discover more about their failures and keep trying to improve their chances of completing their mission, it starts to become clear that these guys are after Milo specifically. Remember that abduction Cavendish witnessed that made him go rogue? That was the Octalians abducting Milo, because we were at the halfway point of the season and it was time for Milo to go missing again.
Wait, is this something that happens often?
At least once a season, apparently. I mean, it happened this past fall. Now it's happening here in the winter.
Here's where things get interesting, because the reason these aliens are drawn to Milo is another callback to the Phineas and Ferb crossover, which gave a scientific explanation for the Murphy's Law Milo gives off, negative probability ions. A particle that the Octalians seem to be very familiar with, but don't really understand. They just fear the effects, and by association, Milo. However, like the conspiratory time travelers before them, once the Octalians get to know Milo, they start to understand that all he wants to do is help out where he can, which they immediately take as permission to send him back to their home planet for reasons. We don't find out what those reasons are right away, though, since the ship crashes thanks to Murphy's Law, but rest assured, they will be back. The wait for the aliens to return is actually kind of ominous, with moments of shedding a bit of light on their motives sprinkled throughout the episodic events leading to the finale. Meanwhile, one of the reasons Dakota and Doofenshmirtz start hanging out is because Dakota recruits him to help find Cavendish after he went rogue. Another helpful reminder of what's going on and how it's still affecting the story and characters. Doof's assistance eventually results in them trying to think like Cavendish, leading to the creation of
Cavendish's head on a platypus body. Whoa!
It's funny because it's a sin against nature. Yeah, I don't really have anything to say about Cavenpuss here. Yes, that is his actual given name. It just seemed like one of those things that I couldn't not mention. I do like that it's potentially a callback to that time Doofenshmirtz clone Perry the Platypus back in the original show, but mostly I'm shocked that Cavenpuss is still around by the end of the season. Speaking of which, the build-up to the big finale is pretty fantastic in my opinion, with a great cliffhanger added onto a seemingly standalone episode, and wasting no time in the next episode for the Octalians to abduct Milo yet again, and leaving the rest of the group reunited but earthbound, having to work together to save him. Milo in Space is a great prologue to the season finale, calling back to several discoveries made throughout the season, and taking the time to repair the more strained relationships in the group. It's equal parts sweet and exciting, and comes together really well. Not to mention having one last eye-catching cliffhanger. That shot of Milo supposedly floating in the cold vacuum of space dominated the show's tag on social media in the week between episodes, bringing us to what turned out to be the final episode of Milo Murphy's Law, where we find out that the reason the Octalians were after Milo is because they observed how skilled he was at dealing with negative probability ions and want him to take on this gigantic, destructive orb of the little buggers that is slowly destroying their planet, known as the Sphere of Calamity. In a way, this is the epitome of how the attitude around Milo has changed this season. He's no longer the person who just causes trouble, but the person who knows how to deal with it better than anyone else. Better than anyone else in the universe, apparently. But he's still a teenager. He ain't exactly Kim Possible, so he gets overwhelmed by this thing pretty quickly. When things really come together is when the rest of Milo's friends make it to Octalia and work together to help him figure out how to contain the Sphere of Calamity. Cavendish gets to realize his dream of saving the world, well, a world anyway, despite some early hesitations. Doofenshmirtz finally thinks things through and makes the scientific discovery that ultimately saves the day. Melissa and Zach do what they do best, stand by Milo, and become a couple? Maybe? And Milo does what he always does, his best, in the face of the odds being incalculably stacked against him, inspiring the Octalians to do the same, despite being very tired and discouraged with this fight when he got there. These efforts give this epic battle of a finale a really heartwarming theme, that difficult problems can be easier to tackle when you collaborate and divide. Breaking an obstacle down and sharing the burden makes it easier to deal with. That's a pretty inspiring message that ties in really well with the show, and they have really creative ways of conveying that too. While I do prefer the end of season 1 as an all-around adventure, I do think the season 2 finale is a better conclusion to a Milo Murphy's Law story arc. It ties in better with the attitude of the show itself, perseverance in the face of adversity, which they're gonna need since the group's only way back to Earth is wrecked by Murphy's Law.
Oops. I think we're gonna need another ship.
And on that beat of our entire main cast now being stranded in space, Milo Murphy's Law ends.
It's my world and we're all living in it.
This is usually where I go into my conclusions, but before I can, we have to talk briefly about what happened here. Why was Milo Murphy's Law canceled? Well, firstly, it's important to note that it never officially was. Disney just kept putting off confirming if they renewed the show, and after doing that for long enough, we all kinda got the message. Now this was going to be a much larger segment in this video, but as it turns out, a lot of other people have been interested in questioning what happened to Milo and Murphy's Law in the last year or two. So that saves me some time, I guess. But I am still going to speculate a bit on what happened here. The show likely lost any hype it was supposed to gain from the Phineas and Ferb crossover after how damn long it took for Disney to air in America, and their mistreatment of the show only got worse from there. I cannot tell you how many times I'd head to YouTube to watch a clip from the newest episode, only to find something from 4 episodes later in the search results that aired in a different country. Yeah, MLP had a similar problem at the time, and I don't get why. If this was an internationally produced show, I'd understand more, but why did a show created in the States not air here first, when its success and future depended on those viewing figures? It just ruined whatever momentum the show might have gotten in ratings by leaking on the internet weeks beforehand. But hey, at least the final episodes premiered in America. That's something, right? Milo and Murphy's Law's dedicated fans worldwide were still kicking as season 2 progressed, but by then it was too late. Between Disney not putting in any effort to advertise or promote it, especially compared to what they did for season 1, and the outrageously long wait between seasons for a show that was ready to go ages before, the die was cast. Milo and Murphy's Law is one of the many shows that Disney sadly just didn't treat very well, ditching the idea of expanding the world of one of its most successful shows to bring in a new audience and bring back an old one, to just sticking to what they knew worked. It's not fair of me, I know, but a small part of me does have a resentment towards Candace Against the Universe for that very reason. When I heard it was taking place in space, I thought that would be the perfect way to tie into Milo's world from the other side, given how season 2 ended and how the show's fate was still a little ambiguous. I realize now that that wouldn't have made much sense since this takes place during Phineas and Ferb's summer vacation, but as much as it has a lot of the high quality work this team usually brings, and full disclosure, as of the making of this video, I haven't actually finished it, I can't help but see it as the last nail in the coffin for Milo and Murphy's Law, and that's a disservice to both projects. Because overall, season 2 of Milo and Murphy's Law was an ambitious and well thought out successor to what the show had offered before. It wasn't always perfect, far from it actually, as I don't think they improved on everything they could have from the first season, and there are quite a few dud episodes that I chose to just not really talk about here, but what it gets right, it gets really right. If there was one major criticism with this season, it was the lack of consistent focus on our main characters. I felt like people were exaggerating this imbalance when the season was airing, since the major storyline still revolves around Milo, but marathoning the season again for this video, yeah, I get where some fans were coming from. Even if it was in funny ways, there are quite a few episodes where Milo and friends are brushed off to the side to tell crazier stories that, at the end of the day, have nothing to do with them. It's a season that had a lot of interesting ideas. While not all of them stuck consistently with the audience, it proved that the show was willing to evolve and take its story and characters to new heights. Explore new places, face different challenges, and keep in tune with the spirit of the show that's been front and center since day one. It was fun, creative, pretty weird, sometimes went on strange tangents, and had a lot of Doofenshmirtz. In other words, it's a Dan and Swampy project, through and through. But by far the most disappointing thing about season 2 of Milo and Murphy's Law is that it was the last season. It only proved what staying power the show could have, and what exciting, quirky adventures could have been had with this cast in this world. The season ends with the group trapped in space. As the season finale proved, you could have so much fun with this group in space. They could have gone the Ciro Nieli route, where the third season is just the cast traveling through space and getting caught up in alien antics. The Dan and Swampy universe has tons of alien races we could barge in on. I saw some fans toss around the idea that they could travel through dimensions next, which would have been perfect timing with multiverses becoming the next big thing. Like Susan the Real Girl coming out before Five Nights at Freddy's perfect. God, isn't it a shame when such creative potential is lost? It's almost fitting because everything that could go wrong with the show did go wrong. It was destiny. Well, even though it's very unlikely we'll ever ever live in Milo's world again, I'll always appreciate the time I got to visit it, as an unexpectedly delightful surprise of a TV show. Not that I expected to be bad, far from it, but I never thought I'd get as invested in it as I did. So if by some bizarre cosmic circumstance anyone who worked on the show is watching and made it past the part where I complained about Zippy, thank you for all of your hard work on Milo Murphy's Law. Even if Disney didn't appreciate you at the time, there were many, many viewers out there who did. And to prove that, it's time to reveal my...
It's my world and we're all living in it.
Like with season 1, this was a pretty easy choice, but unlike season 1, it's not one of the big story-driven adventures, it's first impressions. The episode that tells the story of how Milo met Melissa and how Cavendish met Dakota, which happened at the same time and resulted in both stories crossing paths because of course it did. I'm already a fan of how we met type stories, and with the clever intersections found in a Dan and Swampy show, this one is really high up in that category for me. You know, it was fun and well written and adorable, and I loved it. But let me tell you, there was some tough competition for this spot this season, like Game Night, or Milo Shadow, or Sphere and Loathing in Outer Space, or a bunch of the episodes I mentioned during this review already. And now I'm just sitting here missing the show all over again. Well, I'm just gonna have to keep my head high when things get tough. That's what Milo would want. Thanks for watching, everyone. Definitely let me know what you thought of this season in the comments below. That's why the series is called Let's Talk About. I want to give a very special thanks to my patrons who help support my content, including David L. Sproul, Sebastian Canino of Cinemageddon Reviews, Chelsea Crandall, Hawk Hero, Jinx Productions, and Wait in the Wings. If you'd like to join these fine people in supporting my work while getting cool exclusive perks and helping us reach our very first stretch goal, you can check out my Patreon page at the link in the description, as well as my other social media if you'd like to check out any of those. Thank you so much again for watching, and I will see you guys next time.